Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Tim Tadlock and the Red Raiders still throwing blows in Gainesville, Florida. And we've got a new entry into the Brett Yormark lexicon. We discuss decoupling next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Always appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and a lot to dive into here today. Chris, coming up in just a bit, we'll get to some sound from Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark as they wrapped up Big 12 spring meetings last week. But first, our attention is still set on Gainesville, Florida, which means there is still baseball to be played. That means the Red Raiders are still alive. That's kind of maybe the more so Gator perspective as they fend off elimination in Sunday's ball game. They're still alive here on this Monday, but that is courtesy of a 2-0 start for Texas Tech, Chris, and then a tough one as they drop Sunday's ball game to the Gators to now lead us to this Monday. But a whole lot of good, and I think some of what we have touched on has been obvious this weekend. Culture, what this program has been and typically is, I think, is shining through to a degree here as you take on one of the nation's top seeds, Chris, and you look like one of those scrappy Tim Tadlock baseball teams you have so many times before, but you're facing an incredibly talented and an incredibly deep one, obviously, in Florida, and somebody's going home today.
Yeah. Yes, they are. And I think as you head into today's game, your pitching it sets up a bit better than what Florida's does because you've played one less game, but Florida yesterday, and then that game, they just had a freshman come out and pitch the game of his life and pitch, longer than he had all season. I mean, this is kind of, these regionals is really where you get stretched and you have to kind of get creative a bit, and you see these performances more often than not in certain situations where somebody just kind of comes off the radar, and Jake Fisher did that for Florida. But the Red Raiders have put themselves in a position to move on. Everybody's playing for the right to go to Columbia, South Carolina, and play the Gamecocks next week, who have advanced. And so they're either way. One of these two teams is going to Columbia, South Carolina for next week in the Super Regionals. And I think the Big 12, Texas has moved on. TCU is still in it today with an elimination game versus Arkansas, I think is correct. And then obviously it's the Red Raiders and the Gators. But should to get the bats hot. They had the one play. Trying to remember, it was in the whenever they gave up the 4 runs. I don't know if that was the 5th or the 6th inning, but you have the double play off a ground ball, and you get the double play at home plate. You're thinking unbelievable, and
Unbelievable.
The TV announcer goes, "This is devastating," or "This is a disaster for Florida." And then right. a few minutes later, Florida it kind of started to get some hits and score some runs and things like that. But it was just like the highest to high, lowest to low right there in a. But you've just got to play cleaner baseball. You threw one over first base. Trying to make a play, and I remember the announcers like, he should have just ate it right there. You don't need to try to force something right there. But anyway, maybe the bats will get up. But Tabor Fast should be the starter for the Red Raiders today. And I did think the game within the game a little bit. Too is that Florida has to go to this freshman, and then they went to their stud closer in Brandon Neely, and they got him for I think just under 40 pitches, and so with such a quick turnaround, I bet they could bring Neely back to maybe get an out or two, but I'd be surprised if he were to bring him back, for a lengthy. So you kind of, if anything, you kind of put Florida in a bit of a bind. But again, maybe somebody off the radar steps up for the Gators. I don't know. We'll see.
I was really just glad you got some weather cooperation finally to get the game in. I was fearful of like Tech being in a doubleheader situation here today, and then you don't even exercise the advantage or what you thought would be an advantage
Great
yesterday
point.
against the Gators. But you get the weather out of the way, so you get the game in. So now you're going to remain on that schedule. But you're on the money when you talk about some of these pitching performances, sometime freshmen or otherwise, that just come out of nowhere. Texas Tech has been on the beneficial end of them before in regional play. The Coral Gables regional comes to mind, and that also was a weather split game, I think Sunday into Monday. But I think Tech had a little bit of that for themselves as well with Zane Petty giving a pretty good effort there, a freshman for the Red Raiders yesterday. But like you said, just the bats not really providing that support for what you were able to get for the most part there on the mound. Obviously got a little loose as the game went on. And yeah, it was a little loose there at home plate for a time period for the game. I loved when we were just throwing everybody out at home plate. I wish it would have continued that, but just your standard hit to third base, double play at home plate, routine play, right, Chris? Did you score that one in your book?
I'm not even sure what that's you could watch baseball for another 5 years and not see a double play at home. That was wild. And you're thinking like best case scenario for Texas Tech and worst case for Florida. But yeah, whenever I think Coach Tadlock, they were discussing it. He pushed every right button to that point. And Zane Petty, he exits. They put in Jace Lopez, and maybe that hook happened a bit quicker than it needed to, knowing what we know now. But, hey, you win some, you lose some when it comes to decisions. You try to do the best you can. And you think you're, and I think Petty had gotten behind for the last, 7 or 8 batters. He just started behind in the count. And I just think they were just trying to maybe get out in front of it before the dam broke. But Lopez just couldn't come. He came in and couldn't find the strike zone. So anyway, we'll see what we get. I think though that you're going to have to your bats are going to have to help you out here today. This offense, one of the top offenses in the country that we're used to seeing, it's going to need to do its part today for sure. And it can't necessarily just be on the long ball and someone like Gavin Cash going, hitting 2 over the fence like he did over the weekend. But we'll see what we get. And again, I think the Red Raiders though have done themselves. Whatever happens, I think this is kind of maybe about what we expected. You knew they would fight a bit. You knew they would have a chance, and here they are. And it could go either way. You're going to be a bit of an underdog, I think, in some ways. So you're playing a road game against one of the top national seeds. But nationally, if you win this game, everybody's not going to bat an eye around the country because of what you've done in the decade previous.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're sitting here talking to you on Monday, so we're talking mostly about the most recent result. Yeah. But a shame we can't spend more time talking about Gavin Cash or talking about Mason Molina, because their effort on Friday and then into Saturday were incredible. Guys like Gage Harrelson, Austin Green, some others here or there that have stood out and gotten you to where you are today with a chance still to win the Gainesville Regional. So looking forward to this. That's coming up at 11 a.m. Depending upon when you are listening to this, you may already know the result, but keep it to yourself. Don't tell us. I want to see it in real time. An ESPN Plus broadcast, I believe. But looking forward to that one from Gainesville, Florida, for the Red Raiders and the Gators. One final go-round as Texas Tech hopes to remain a postseason thorn in the Gators' side. We'll have plenty more on that, for better or worse, on the next edition of Locked On Texas Tech. But coming up dead ahead, Big 12 spring meetings have adjourned. What did we learn? Who's saying what? We'll listen into a couple of thoughts from Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark. And how much money did they make? Because that's what makes the wheel keep turning. We'll get to that and more coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book and the official sports book of Locked On. Head over right now to the App Store, download the FanDuel app, or head to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and find out why it's America's #1 sports book. The app is safe and secure, easy to use, and you're always getting paid instantly with FanDuel. And if you've never done it before, now's the perfect time to get started because new customers are getting in on that no sweat first bet. Now up to $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. That's right, $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet don't bank. That's with the no sweat first bet. So get on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon or download the FanDuel app. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon and get set up with the no sweat first bet and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Stepping back from Texas Tech baseball and looking at a bigger picture now to wrap up today's episode. Big 12 spring meetings going down, and as we were touching on some of those things last week, Chris, revolving around future plans, obviously everyone continues to be highly interested in moves to be made or not made, and only time will tell what those include, either on the left coast, the right coast, somewhere in between, or maybe that knuckleball coming out of like Storrs, Connecticut or something. You never know exactly what you're going to get with Brett Yormark in the Big 12 Conference. But wanted to spend some time here today talking about some of what we did learn last week from those conversations. And let's start that off with taking a listen to the aforementioned Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark talking about some of those future plans and how they prioritize criteria that meets what they're looking for. Here's Brett Yormark.
So there has been conversations, obviously, about what would happen in that next TV cycle. Certainly, nothing can be done now, nor should it. But as we think about the future and ways to create value, there is always that option to decouple basketball from football to see if there's further value we can create for the conference. And we've positioned ourselves to do so. We have some guiding principles, when we think about expansion. I mean, it's all strategic here. And at the top is the academic alignment and the leadership and the cultural fit and the geography and the athletic performance and the upside that a potential institution has as they would potentially, join the Big 12. And we think about all those things as a collective group, and we discussed all those guiding principles this week.
Now, time to react. That's a mouthful there by Brett Yormark. Yeah, so there's several things. Decouple. Never heard that term before. Is that what he said? Decouple? I think
he said decouple. Yeah, I think that's originated by Gwyneth Paltrow and the Coldplay guy. A conscious decoupling or uncoupling.
Yeah, there you go. He's talking. This kind of got slipped in there a little bit in that he's talking about like the next round of TV negotiations, which pleases me to hear him phrase it that way because it tells me that Brett Yormark is in this for big picture. He's kind of, looking down the line a bit and thinking big picture instead of just, I'm going to, wear this commissioner hat for the Big 12, kind of play with it for 2 or 3 years, see if I can't get it on the tracks, and I'm out of here going to go do something different. And he still could, but I do like that he's thinking off into the future, and some of these decisions are being made with the future in mind, big picture. So, Calvin, I don't know if we ultimately found out anything new at the end of last week. However, he is telling you point blank that they are trying to be outside the box. And if they can't, because we've kind of phrased it this way before, I'd be willing to bet they sat around the boardroom at the Greenbrier there up in West Virginia, and they went through various options. And I know that almost for it has to be for the option A just has to be pointed toward the Pac-12 options. But the fascinating thing is what options B, C, D, E, F, G? How many letters do you go in the alphabet on various options on what they do? And then the next thing is See, and I'd be willing to bet you, though, too, that a lot was decided from this standpoint, and this is the most crucial thing, is when would those options be executed? And we just simply don't know. And I just have to think that every option after option A has to do with once the Pac-12 hears what their media rights deal, or once a Pac-12 school joins us or just says, hey, man, they've signed a new agreement, then we can kind of go to B, C, D, whatever it may be. Yeah. And I know that, like, the Skuveniks of that group and all those, that's why I think he mentioned academics. You mentioned geography. They don't. Brett Yormark has mentioned coast to coast. In theory, that sounds great, and you've tapped into all the time zones and all that. For a school president, trying to fly their teams coast to coast and all that, there's an expense with that. There's time lost in the classroom, whatever. There's real things to that when you're going from the Zags to UConn, if that's a conference game, right? Going to Hawaii all the way to whatever. I don't know. And so I think they probably had a lot of those kinds of conversations. Like, okay, Brett, if you want to decouple and you want to do basketball only, what does this look like? What is this worth? Do we know a dollar figure on this? Like, how would we execute this plan? How would we? Because when I hear him use the term decouple, it's telling me we just want UConn's basketball program. We don't want football. That's the way I hear it. We don't want Gonzaga's other sports. We just want Gonzaga's basketball program. We see a value in basketball, and he kept saying we feel it's undervalued out there. Well, I think he's about to go find out if he can create more at some level. Now, to me, this all changes, and maybe it doesn't, but I think it all changes. If you were to get a bunch of yeses from 2 to 4 Pac-12 schools, maybe you don't even have to pursue this basketball only situation. But maybe you do. Maybe he's looking off into the distance and saying, yeah, we want to do our football only deal, but I want to do this basketball only thing too. And let's create a whole separate, contract and conference. And I don't know, but he's trying to own that space. It's pretty clear. He's telling you that repeatedly.
Seems like you'd be foolish to rule anything out. You would think, if you get into a position of adding Power 5 options, then maybe that closes the door. But I wouldn't be so sure that would actually be the case. And like geographical fit at this point in time, what does that mean? Like on the continental United States or planet Earth?
Yeah.
The Milky Way galaxy. I mean, we've already stretched our legs plenty far, and I hope we'll continue to do so, because I've also been in favor of the Manifest Destiny Conference. He said we're not getting a new name. He said there will be a refreshed branding effort in 2024, but no new name. But I just think it's because he hasn't heard Manifest Destiny Conference yet. So when I get that in his ear, we're probably going to have a name change and hopefully a nice cut of that merch for ya boy. And speaking of merch, you were just hearing the sound of Brett Yormark there, but you didn't see on video actually wearing a Colorado shirt and a UConn ball cap while he was delivering those comments. So yeah, definitely some options that they are checking out. Is it a lie or not? Fact check it yourself and find out. Chris, what we did find out, a hard number. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark said that the conference is distributing around $440 million to its membership for that 22-23 calendar. Obviously, some projections can be based off of that now as to what you might be looking at when you get into this new era. Very difficult to do because clearly you're swapping out 2 for an additional 4 that you hadn't even gotten in the league yet. So we'll see what all that's going to look like. But I was curious on your thoughts about what that number actually turned out to be. And I really do wonder, from your perspective, do you believe, or how far do you believe someone could hypothetically really take basketball rights? Like where is this basketball money that is untapped yet, if it is out there?
Yeah, so the dollar figure doesn't surprise me. I think it's pretty fascinating to me that it depends on where you look at these numbers and how it's presented. Because yes, the ACC brought in more money. Yes, the Pac-12 may have even brought in more money. However, they all have more members than you did,
Right.
but it's amount per school. That's what you're concerned about. And as far as that goes, like I think for 44 million per institution, which is all kind of as a tech, podcast here. That's what we're kind of focused on, is how does it affect the Red Raiders? And that's, 44 mil is third in the country behind the SEC and the Big Ten in whatever order that is. But you're third. That's the third most, because there's only distributing it to 10 schools. Now that's going to change a bit, and obviously there's going to be a few more mouths to feed. But I think they're going to kind of get worked into the equation. But so that part doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I think like there was a and I'll mention the basketball component here in a second about maybe trying to monetize that, but this was like a random kind of one of those boring emails that we get from the Big 12 last week. Most people probably didn't even pay attention to it, and it was an email from Brett Yormark about how, or the league, about how we're going to create this commercial arm, and I forgot exactly the phrasing of it, but it essentially was, we're going to create an arm in the league to go find sponsorships for title events. And I think one of the events mentioned was the All Big 12 Pro Day that they have decided to do in Frisco. And so there's now somebody or somebodies in the conference office that will be, whether it's third party or in the office, that will be tasked with finding a title sponsor for this event, or sponsors. And this is just one of those under the radar creating revenue opportunities that Brett Yormark is trying to get done. And it because you're trying to keep up, and you're trying to kind of cut into that gap that the Big Ten and the SEC have created, and you're trying to figure out every little thing that you can. And so I just didn't want to gloss over that little tidbit, because I think that is he's trying to generate revenue for the league by having this event, and I think they'll be able to do it. How much, I don't know. I think he's about to try to find out. As far as the basketball thing goes, I've seen people kind of thumbs up this, thumbs down. People are kind of a bit timid with it. They're just not real sure, because we don't know the context. Yeah. Is this a 20-team basketball league? I mean, because I could see everything from, we're going to just add some schools, they're going to play basketball only. Maybe we increase our conference game count by a bit. Or I could see a scenario to where, last week we were talking, Cowan, about the discussion, the theories, I should say, about the Big Ten and the SEC just saying, you know what, we're just going to have an AFC and NFC. We're just going to play with each other. All our games are going to be like, it's going to be like a mini NFL. I can see that you could have the same theory with what Yormark is wanting to do with hoops, to where you just say, man, if we scoop up 22 programs or something, you could play 11 teams twice. You could play some crossover games. I know I'm not in any way suggesting that's what he's doing, but it just seems like he's trying to figure out how to own that space. And there are people on the San Diego State campus and in the UNLV campus. They have been, the word on those campuses is, we're going somewhere, we just don't know where.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the basketball only, and then the Pac-12 media rights and all, it's all kind of just ties in together. There's some of these institutions that I think are going to get their name called in some form or fashion. It could be full-fledged member of Pac-12, full-fledged of the Big 12, basketball only in the Big 12. Something is going to happen here. And I think with like San Diego State, it's got to happen in June, But we've talked about Vegas. I was just there, about a week ago. And it's in November and December. It is a college basketball mecca of sorts. And it is again in March, because they've got 4 to 5 arenas. You've got, it's going to host the NBA Summer League this summer, but in November, December, there are non-conference like double headers and games going on, neutral site stuff going on. It's wild. MGM has an arena. T-Mobile has an arena. The Orleans arena is where the NIT hosted that. The Mandalay Bay has the arena. That's where some of the the summer league stuff. So, and I think Brett Yormark, as we've talked about, he sees revenue opportunities. Can we run, special events out of this deal and get sponsors? Well, heck yeah, you can. It's already happening, but you could put the Big 12 brand over it and have some of your, expanded basketball league. I don't know, with some, November and December type events. You could have your conference tournament there potentially instead of in Kansas City if Vegas would pay you more. I mean, there's a variety of different opportunities there in Las Vegas, in my opinion. But I just think, hey, he's a Brooklyn Nets guy. He's a concert guy. He's a boxing guy. This is somebody that basketball is his sweet spot, in my opinion, because he's lived in that NBA, sizzle, pomp and circumstance type world for so many years. And I think that he's trying to figure out how to tap into that at the collegiate level. And he sees, because I don't know if he came into this still thinking this, but I think he saw last year and he's like, damn, this league can hoop. And you heard all the national talk. And so now it's trying to figure out, how do we attach a dollar figure to that?
It's going to be really interesting, and I'm sure he'll leave no stone unturned, but got to wonder where it might come from if there is some untapped, basketball cash spout. And I guess in this new Big 12 era, that's the primary focus for me. The thing I'm most interested in is protecting that member institution payout, Chris, because that's what you were able to do so well when you became a 10-team league. And I think you were very judicious in not expanding at various points. I saw local jackwagon Stu Mandel of Sports Illustrated, or I don't know, some rag out there, talking about, once again, well, the Big 12, years ago, they turned their nose up at Houston and Cincinnati. They didn't want them then, but now what's changed? UT and OU left. Jackass, what do you mean what's changed? The two biggest brands in the league left. So the entire situation changed, obviously.
Well, yeah, the Pac-12 always thumbed their nose up at San Diego State. And now they may be like, please like us.
That's when you know that something is so agenda-driven. It should just be like part of the marketing department. There's nothing in Stu Mandel's brain that made him think this is a nice, insightful, investigative piece as to the situation with the Big 12 conference. Because when you put out a headline like that, it's like, well, you know what the difference is. Or maybe, I don't know, you're too mush-brained to not. I don't know. But that's when you know there is agenda behind it. It's just like with these numbers like conference total payout or total revenue generated. Jim Phillips is yakking about being number 3 in the nation as far as money made. That's the ACC commissioner. Buddy, your members are making less than Big 12 members. You don't get that? You don't understand why Florida State's trying to get the hell out of there because UCF's about to be making more than they are? So let's drop the charade. I know college sports is all about marketing and manipulation. It's kind of like, on occasion during the regular season, you'll see somebody from the WAC and they're like, oh, look at this top 4 statistical defense in the nation. When the last 3 weeks they played Tom, Dick, and Harry University. We can see, the difference here. So it just all kind of ties into me, Chris, and everybody using obviously what they can as far as the talking point that they want to really drive home. But the reality was for the Big 12 for all these years since they became a 10-team league that they were making more money than anyone outside of the Big 10 or the SEC per member institution. I'm really curious as to how that's going to evolve or change. I hope it doesn't get so far to the direction of being dilutive that you really hamstring yourself there, but I don't think it will. Either way, Chris, I do believe that when we get into this next phase, you're going to find someone looking at the Big 12 conference and maybe a little bit surprised at how appealing the situation might be if you've only been gobbling up the Stu Mandel narratives out there all along. Eventually a reality is going to show up. Like, this will all come to a head. The rubber will meet the road, and whatever agenda-driven articles that have been written and pushed here or there will matter nothing, because at the end of the day, cash makes a ooh, ooh. You know what the saying is, and it's not one I can repeat on this family-friendly program. But that's where the reality lies, and the Big 12 has been in a good situation per member institution within that reality for a long period of time now, and I hope that will continue. But you got to feel like, it's as exciting as it's ever been with this commissioner. I think you touched on it earlier. Doesn't feel like a Band-Aid. Doesn't feel like – I was thinking about the name Chuck Ninus when you were talking about that. who kind of arrived on the scene and is like, all right, I'll put out this Dan Beebe raging inferno, and then I'm out. And then Bob Bowlesby was kind of in the picture for a more extended period, but doesn't quite feel that way with Yormark. Hopefully we're not misreading that, because I'm just enjoying the adventure, if nothing else. So I'd like him to hang around.
Yeah, I think he's going to take you on a wild ride, and people may agree or disagree. And I think he's rolled the dice and I think done really well. And there may come a time where it's like, okay, there's a misstep here or there. I don't know if some maybe feel like he's already taken one of those. But
hey, we may get some details on one of those perceived missteps this week, because he said we were going to get more info on Big 12 Mexico. And I know there are a lot of varying opinions on that excursion, but be on the lookout this week, because Mr. Yormark said details this week on, I guess, the intentions there with the Big 12 abroad. So we'll be here on Locked On Texas Tech covering that whenever it comes across the bow. Chris, enjoyed the time as always, man. The insight and perspectives. Thanks again, and we'll do it tomorrow.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Keep hope alive, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
You got it. Subscribe on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. We'll be back to recap, for better or worse, whatever's going down today in Gainesville, Florida, with Tim Tadlock and the Red Raiders. So be there or be square. For Chris, I'm Casey. We'll see you again for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.